Ma'am, I think you took a wrong turn. The VIP spouse's lounge is back down the hall. The voice was young, laced with the kind of breezy, unearned confidence that only a freshly minted commission could bestow. It belonged to a Navy lieutenant, his name tag reading Miller, whose crisp white uniform seemed to still hold the folds from the package. He stood with his arms loosely crossed, a gatekeeper to the pulsing heart of the Joint Interagency Operations Center, JIOC. Major Elena Petrova didn't turn. Her focus remained on the vast floor-to-ceiling map of the world that dominated the far wall. It was a living entity, a constellation of data points, satellite tracks, and encrypted communication links that blinked and shifted in a silent, ceaseless ballet. She could feel the low, steady hum of the center's lifeblood deep in her bones. It was a familiar symphony. Her royal blue top was a stark splash of civilian color in a sea of camouflage, naval whites, and Air Force blues. Her ash-brown hair was tied back in a simple, functional knot at the nape of her neck. To Lieutenant Miller, she was an anomaly, a disruption in the carefully controlled pattern of his watch. "Ma'am," he repeated, stepping closer. The scent of fresh starch and youthful ambition wafted from him. "This is a restricted area. I need to see you back to the administrative wing." Elena finally turned, her movements unhurried, economical. She met his gaze with green eyes the color of a winter sky, calm and startlingly direct. She held up her Common Access Card, CAC, the green-backed credential of a non-active duty affiliate, pinched between her thumb and forefinger. "I have access, Lieutenant." Her voice was even, with a low timbre that carried easily over the ambient noise of the command floor. It held no anger, no defensiveness. It was a simple statement of fact. Miller's eyes flicked to the card, then back to Elena's face. A small, patronizing smile touched his lips. "Right, a contractor pass. I still need to verify your access for this specific tier of the skiff. It's for your own safety, you understand?" He didn't reach for the card. Instead, he gestured to a security podium near the entrance. "If you'll just follow me, we can get this sorted out. We get a lot of new support staff who get turned around on their first day." He had already solidified his opinion of who and what she was. The royal blue top, the hair, the fact that she was a woman standing alone in a place of immense power. It all coalesced into a single, erroneous conclusion in his mind. He saw a secretary, a policy advisor's assistant, maybe a linguist who had wandered off from her designated cubicle. He did not see the reason the entire operations floor existed in the first place. "That won't be necessary," Elena said, her voice retaining its placid control. "I'm here for the Chimera brief." The name of the project, a word spoken only within the shielded confines of rooms like this one, should have been a key. It should have stopped him cold. Instead, it seemed to embolden him. He saw it not as a password, but as a piece of information she had simply overheard. "Everyone's here for the Chimera brief, ma'am," he said with a condescending chuckle. "But access to the primary observation deck is limited to flag level and senior command staff. I'm sure your employer has a conference room set up for you somewhere." He was now actively blocking her path, his stance shifting from casual to proprietary. A few nearby analysts, their headsets momentarily lifted from one ear, began to watch the interaction with cautious interest. "Lieutenant," Elena said, and for the first time, a sliver of ice edged her tone. "Take my card, scan it, read the name, read the billet description, then step aside." The directness of the command, so at odds with her civilian attire, seemed to finally register. A flicker of uncertainty crossed Miller's face, but it was quickly replaced by a flush of irritation. He felt his authority being challenged, and in this arena, authority was everything. He snatched the card from her fingers with more force than was necessary. He stomped over to the security podium, his polished shoes squeaking on the immaculate floor. An Air Force senior airman, her face a mask of professional neutrality, watched as he aggressively slid the card into the reader. He squinted at the screen, his brow furrowed. He had expected to see a corporate logo, a contractor designation, a low-level clearance. What he saw made no sense to him. Grant, Allison J. Major, USMCR, CLTS, SCI, SAP. Billet, Senior Consultant Project Chimera Diver, JCS. He read it 3 times. Major? This woman? He looked back at her, standing perfectly still amidst the controlled chaos of the JIOC. His mind rebelled against the data. It has to be a mistake, an old ID, a glitch in the system. This is an expired credential, he declared, his voice a little too loud. He was playing to the small audience now, trying to regain the upper hand. Or a misprint. There's no way. There is a way, Lieutenant, Elena said, her voice carrying across the space between them. The way is that you are mistaken. I'm going to need to make a call to verify this, Miller said, puffing out his chest. We can't have civilians walking around with fraudulent military identification. That's a serious offense. He was escalating, doubling down on his initial assumption because the alternative, that he had just condescendingly challenged a field-grade officer from a sister service who possessed clearances far above his own, was too humiliating to contemplate. He picked up a secure line handset, turning his back to her as if she were a suspect being processed. Elena's gaze drifted away from him. Sweeping across the room, she saw the faces of the analysts, some curious, some annoyed at the disruption. She saw the master clocks on the wall displaying Zulu time, local time, and the times in Kabul, Seoul, and Ramstein. And she saw, at the far end of the observation deck, a familiar face. Master Chief Petty Officer Torres, a man whose face was a roadmap of a 30-year career in naval communications, was watching. His headset was off. He wasn't looking at Elena, but intently at Lieutenant Miller. And as he watched the young officer speak into the phone, Torres's eyes narrowed, a slow, dawning comprehension spreading across his features. He had seen her name, Grant, on the initial Chimera access roster. It hadn't clicked then, but seeing her here, seeing the quiet, unshakable authority she projected, even in the face of this foolish challenge, the old sea stories and classified after-action reports began to surface in his memory. Elena's hand went into her pocket, her fingers closing around a cool, heavy disc of metal. It was a challenge coin, its edges worn smooth from years of carry. Miller's accusation of fraud stung, not because it was true, but because it was the polar opposite of the truth she had lived. The coin in her hand was a testament to that truth. As she felt the raised relief of the eagle, anchor, and trident under her thumb, the sterile, climate-controlled air of the JIOC faded away, replaced by the memory of dust and the metallic tang of cordite. The coin hadn't been given to her in a ceremony. It had been pressed into her palm in the back of a shuddering C-130, its interior lit by the hellish red glow of tactical lighting. They were banking hard out of a contested valley in Kunar province. The man who gave it to her was a Delta Force colonel. His team, a dozen of the most capable operators on the planet, were alive because of a ghost they had never seen, a voice on the radio they knew only by her call sign. He had leaned in close, his voice a gravelly whisper over the roar of the engines. "Warlock 6, he'd said, using the name that was both her shield and her weapon. "My guys are breathing because you can hear whispers in the static. Don't ever let anyone tell you what a warrior looks like." A sharp, indignant voice from Lieutenant Miller snapped Elena back to the present. He was practically preening now, the handset still pressed to his ear. "Yes, sir, I have her here. A woman, long blonde hair, yes, a blue top claiming to be a Marine major. The system shows a clearance, but it has to be a legacy error. I've recommended we detain her for questioning by base security." He was proud of himself. He was following procedure. He was protecting the sanctity of the command center. He was, in his own mind, the hero of this little story. He didn't see Master Chief Torres, who had heard the name Grant and the Project Chimera, and was now moving with a purpose that belied his age. Torres ignored the secure line on the podium. He walked to his own console, his fingers flying across a keyboard, bringing up an encrypted chat channel reserved for the command staff. His message was short, stripped of pleasantries, and charged with an urgency that would be instantly understood at the highest levels. Torres, MCPO. Sir, urgent. LT Miller is detaining Warlock 6 at the JIOC entrance. He hit send. He knew the call sign was a risk. It wasn't official. It wasn't in any personnel file. But it was a legend, and he was betting that in the room where the Chimera brief was about to happen, that legend was known. Back at the podium, Lieutenant Miller was oblivious. He was relishing the final moments of his victory. He hung up the phone with a decisive click. "All right, ma'am," he said, turning back to Elena. His voice was firm. "Official. My commanding officer agrees. Your credentials cannot be verified. We're going to have to ask you to come with us. The security detail is on its way. I'd advise you to cooperate fully. Making a scene will only make things worse for you." He had crossed the final line. It was no longer a misunderstanding. It was a threat. He had accused a decorated field-grade officer of fraud and was now preparing to have her frog marched out of the one place she was most needed. Elena Grant did not reply. She simply watched the main doors to the observation deck, her expression unreadable. She had faced down far more dangerous men than this puffed-up lieutenant. The urgent message from Master Chief Torres flashed onto a private monitor inside the flag-level conference room adjacent to the JIOC. The room was soundproof, its occupants shielded from the drama unfolding just yards away. An Air Force Lieutenant General, a woman with sharp, intelligent eyes and 2 stars on her collar, was mid-sentence, outlining a strategic objective. A Navy Vice Admiral, Admiral Stanton, the overall commander of the Joint Task Force, sat at the head of the table, flanked by a Coast Guard Vice Admiral. The Navy Admiral's aide, a young commander, saw the message pop up on his tablet. His eyes widened. He stood up, breaking protocol, and walked swiftly to the Admiral, leaning down to whisper in his ear. "Sir, Warlock 6 is on the floor, and she's being detained by the watch officer." The effect on the room was instantaneous and electric. The Air Force General stopped talking. The Coast Guard Admiral sat bolt upright. Vice Admiral Stanton's face, moments before a mask of calm authority, hardened into something resembling a thundercloud. He didn't need to ask for clarification. He knew exactly who Warlock 6 was. He had read the classified reports that were still the stuff of legend at the National Security Agency, and SOCOM. "On screen," the Admiral commanded, his voice a low growl. The aide tapped his tablet, and the main screen in the conference room, which had been displaying satellite imagery, switched to a live security feed of the JIOC entrance. They saw it all. Lieutenant Miller, standing with his chest puffed out, the nervous senior airman at the security podium, and Elena Grant standing alone in her royal blue top, calm, patient, and surrounded by an invisible, unreachable wall of dignity. The Admiral's gaze was fixed on her. He swiped on his own tablet, pulling up her file. The screen glowed with a list of accomplishments that made most career officers look like amateurs. Bronze Star with V for Valor. Defense Meritorious Service Medal. Combat Action Ribbon. Her analysis directly led to the neutralization of 3 high-value targets credited with saving the lives of 14 members of Task Force 121. "He's detaining a national asset," the Air Force General said, her voice tight with disbelief and fury. "Over a goddamn ID check." Admiral Stanton stood up, his chair scraping back harshly. "He's not detaining anyone," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "He's ending his career." He looked at the other 2 flag officers. "Let's go for a walk." Back on the JIOC floor, Lieutenant Miller's patience was wearing thin. The security team he had called for hadn't arrived yet, and Elena's unnerving calm was starting to get under his skin. He decided to press his advantage to cement his authority before the armed guards arrived. "Ma'am, I'm giving you a final chance," he said, taking a step toward her. "You can admit this was all a misunderstanding, a foolish prank, maybe. If you come clean now, we can potentially resolve this without involving federal agents. But if you persist in this fraudulent charade, he let the threat hang in the air. He was sure she would break, that she would finally confess. He was completely unprepared for what happened next. With a soft, pneumatic hiss, the main doors to the observation deck slid open. The subtle, ever-present hum of the JIOC seemed to vanish, sucked into a sudden, absolute vacuum of silence. Every operator, every analyst, every person on that floor felt the shift in the atmosphere. The primal, instinctual recognition of apex predators entering the environment. 3 of them, Vice Admiral Stanton, the task force commander, Lieutenant General Wallace, the Air Force's top intelligence officer, and Vice Admiral Hayes of the Coast Guard. A constellation of 9 stars moving together with a singular, unstoppable purpose. They strode onto the floor, their aides scrambling to keep pace. The entire room snapped to attention, 100 bodies moving as one. A rustle of uniforms and scraping of chairs that sounded like a single, sharp thunderclap. All except 2. Lieutenant Miller, who was frozen in place, his mouth half open, his final foolish threat dying on his lips. And Elena Grant, who simply watched them approach. Stanton didn't look at Miller. He didn't look at anyone else. His eyes were locked on Elena. He, Wallace, and Hayes marched directly to her, their path cleaving through the stunned and silent crowd of personnel. They stopped precisely 3 feet in front of her, and then, in perfect synchronized unison, the 3 admirals snapped to the sharpest, most respectful salute Lieutenant Miller had ever seen in his life. Their hands cut through the air, crisp and exact. It wasn't the perfunctory salute given to a junior officer. It was the salute of deference, the salute one gives to a peer, or in this case, to someone whose specific, crucial value transcended the normal hierarchy. "Major Grant," Vice Admiral Stanton said, his voice booming in the cathedral-like silence. "My apologies for the delay. We were just convening. We're ready for your brief whenever you are." A collective gasp seemed to ripple through the room. Lieutenant Miller's face, which had been flushed with righteous authority, was now the color of ash. His entire world had just been turned upside down. Stanton held his salute for a moment longer before dropping it. He then turned his head just slightly, his gaze falling upon Miller for the first time. It was not a look of anger. It was a look of profound Arctic disappointment. Infinitely worse. "Commander," Stanton said to his aide, though his eyes were still drilling into Miller. "Please remind the JIOC staff who our guest is today." He turned back to Elena. "Major, if you'll excuse us for one moment, a point of clarification seems to be in order." The aide, a man who knew his boss well, stepped forward and cleared his throat. He didn't need to raise his voice. Every person on that floor was hanging on his every word. "Attention on deck," the commander announced, his voice ringing with formality. "This is Major Elena Grant, United States Marine Corps Reserve. Major Grant is the chief architect and lead strategist for Project Chimera. She served 2 tours in Afghanistan as the lead signals intelligence, SIGINT officer for Joint Special Operations Task Force Aurelius. Her call sign was Warlock 6. The name landed like a bomb. Warlock 6. It was a name whispered in secure comms channels and classified debriefs. The ghost in the machine who had dismantled entire enemy networks from a keyboard thousands of miles away, the one who could hear a pin drop in a hurricane of signal noise. The operators on the floor, the ones who dealt in the shadows and the whispers, knew that name. They just never knew it belonged to the calm woman with ash-brown hair and green eyes standing before them. "During Operation Spartan Fury," the commander continued, his voice like a hammer striking an anvil, "Major Grant's real-time intelligence fusion prevented a multi-pronged ambush on a SEAL team, saving 14 lives. Her work led to the successful capture of 3 top-tier enemy commanders, effectively collapsing the insurgency's leadership in the northern province. For this, she was awarded the Bronze Star with Valor. She is here today at the direct request of the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff." The aide finished. The silence that followed was heavy, thick with the weight of revelation. Lieutenant Miller looked as if he might faint. He had not just made a mistake. He had insulted a living legend. Vice Admiral Stanton finally addressed Miller directly. His voice was no longer loud. It was a low, surgical instrument of destruction. "Lieutenant Miller," he began, "you are the watch officer on this floor. Your primary duty is to facilitate the secure and efficient operation of this command. It is not your duty to play gatekeeper based on your own uniformed, spectacularly wrong assumptions. You did not read the credentials. You did not listen to the name of the project. You saw a woman in civilian clothes and you invented a narrative that fit your prejudices. You have failed in your duties. You have embarrassed this command and you have insulted a decorated officer from a sister service. Report to my office with your commanding officer at 1400 hours. Be prepared to explain in detail why you are still fit to hold a commission in the United States Navy." He didn't wait for a response. He turned back to Elena, his entire demeanor softening. "Major, again my apologies, shall we?" Elena gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. But before she moved to follow them, she looked at the shattered young man in the white uniform. She saw the fear and humiliation in his eyes, and in that moment she chose not to crush him. "Admirals," she said, her voice calm and clear. "Lieutenant Miller was thorough. The security of a facility like this is paramount. His instincts to verify were correct." She then turned her gaze fully on Miller. "The standard is the standard, Lieutenant. It's the same for everyone. Your only mistake was failing to apply it fairly. Don't see a uniform or a civilian top. See the person, read the card, trust the system. That's all." It was a masterclass in grace. She had not excused his behavior, but she had offered him a lifeline, a lesson instead of a final damning judgment. As she said the words, a final fleeting image came to her. The origin of Warlock. Not a battlefield, but a sterile, windowless room at Fort Meade. Her, a young captain then, in front of a bank of monitors, a headset clamped over her ears. For 3 days straight, she had been hunting for a single, ghost-like signal in the electronic ether. Everyone else had given up, convinced it was a dead end. But she persisted, fueled by caffeine and an unshakable belief in the data. And then, in the deepest hour of the third night, she found it. A faint, encrypted whisper. Her voice, hoarse but steady, had crackled over the command net. "All stations, this is Grant. I have the trigger. I am the Warlock." The name had stuck. That quiet, relentless focus was the same weapon she had just deployed on the JIOC floor. The battle was different, but the principle was the same. See the truth, no matter how it's disguised. The fallout was swift and decisive. Captain Davis was formally relieved of his duties as acting OIC of the Annex, pending a full command investigation. Colonel Theron, true to his word, used the incident as a command-wide teaching moment. A mandatory training refresh on equal opportunity, harassment, and most pointedly, proper leadership and professional courtesy was swiftly implemented. New SOPs were published for all access points, explicitly stating that electronic verification was the sole determinant of access. Lieutenant Miller was formally reprimanded and reassigned to a dreary administrative post in Norfolk. His once bright career prospects were now permanently dimmed. Weeks later, the dust had settled. One rainy afternoon, Elena was on the indoor running track at the base gym, methodically ticking off miles when she saw a familiar figure standing by the water fountain. It was Miller. He was in physical training gear, but he stood with a slumped posture that seemed alien to his formerly proud bearing. He saw her, and for a moment he looked like he was going to turn and flee. Instead, he took a deep breath and walked toward her as she slowed to a stop. "Ma'am," he said, his voice quiet, stripped of all its former arrogance. He wouldn't meet her eyes. "Major Grant, I wanted to apologize. What I did was inexcusable. I was wrong. I was unprofessional, and I was disrespectful. I'm sorry." The apology was earnest, born of deep and genuine humiliation. Elena studied him for a moment. She could have dismissed him, but that wasn't her way. "Your apology is accepted, Lieutenant," she said, her tone neutral. He finally looked up, his eyes filled with a mixture of relief and shame. "Thank you, ma'am. I've been doing a lot of thinking. I understand that I have a lot to learn." Elena nodded slowly. "We all do, every day." She decided to offer him not forgiveness, but a compass. "Let me give you one piece of advice, Lieutenant. From now on, when you meet someone, don't look at the package. Read the resume, the skills, the experience, the qualifications. That's all that matters. The rest is just noise." A seed of mentorship planted in the hard soil of his failure. It was up to him to water it. He simply nodded, a profound understanding dawning on his face. "Yes, ma'am, I will." She gave him a final curt nod, then turned and resumed her run, leaving him by the water fountain to contemplate the most valuable and most painful lesson of his career.